All right, so we in here in the Shock Exchange, of course, and this is Trump and the G, the man who canceled Jimmy Kimmel. Jimmy Kimmel's show was canceled by Disney tonight over incendiary comments he made about Charlie Kirk on last night's show, and the comments were made in poor taste, and they weren't called for. Charlie Kirk was a victim of a political assassination, and Jimmy Kimmel's trying to be funny about it. And again, this goes along with this late night show talk show hosts who have this left leaning bias. They only make jokes about the right. They only make jokes about Trump. Anything involving Trump. And he made some comments about Trump's reaction to Charlie Kirk's assassination. Trump had previously said he's not going to tolerate any slander involving pursuant to Jimmy Kimmel, just pursuant to Charlie Kirk, and Jimmy Kimmel went there. He effed around and found out. People will say Trump had him canceled. However, the head of the FCC had a podcast. He was on a podcast earlier today, and he was visibly upset about Jimmy Kimmel's monologue, and he also talked about taking action against ABC, and he basically called Jimmy Kimmel talentless. And he has some very more things to say about the left, the far left bias of the corporate media, whether it's NPR, PBS, cable shows. He also mentioned Joanne Reed, so on and so forth. So I'm going to show you his comments about Jimmy Kimmel, which really preempted. I think Disney sort of preempted the FCC action by taking action of their own. So here goes.
When you look at the conduct that has taken place by Jimmy Kimmel, it appears to be some of the sickest conduct possible. As you've indicated, there are avenues here for the FCC. So there are some ways in which I need to be a little bit careful, because we could be called ultimately to be a judge on some of these claims that come up. But I don't think this is an isolated incident. I mean, you go back to Representative Swalwell, and he had a tweet out last week where he was saying that, emphasizing that Charlie Kirk's killer was a straight white male from a Republican family that voted for Donald Trump. In some quarters, there's a very concerted effort to try to lie to the American people about the nature, as you indicate, of one of the most significant, newsworthy public interest acts that we've seen in a long time. And what appears to be an action by Jimmy Kimmel to play into that narrative that this was somehow a MAGA or Republican motivated person. If that's what happened here with his conduct, that is really, really sick. And I've been very clear from the moment that I have become chairman of the FCC. I want to reinvigorate the public interest channel. What people don't understand is that the broadcasters, and you've gotten this right, are entirely different than people that use other forms of communication. They have a license granted by us at the FCC, and that comes with it an obligation to operate in the public interest. And we can get into some ways that we've been trying to reinvigorate the public interest and some changes that we've seen. But frankly, when you see stuff like this, I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead.
What kind of action would you see? I, at the very least, would like to have an on-air apology from Jimmy Kimmel to the Kirk family, to all of those who he slandered, because he did say that Charlie Kirk, he is effectively saying that our movement did this. Our movement killed Charlie, that Charlie was deserving of this, effectively. And we've seen that rear its head. This happens quite regularly, actually. on MSNBC and on other networks where they're trying to victim blame. And what that does, Mr. Chairman, respectfully, is continues the lie and continues the threat level to say effectively that we have no share in this problem at all on the left. This is a clear-cut case. What would you like to see done at ABC?
Well, look, I think what you said there strikes me as a very reasonable, minimal step that can be taken. I mean, obviously, look, there's calls for Kimmel to be fired. I think, you could certainly see a path forward for suspension over this. And again, the FCC is going to have remedies that we could look at. And again, we may ultimately be called to be a judge on that. But
yes,
this also strikes me as sort of conduct that to some extent shows some sort of desperate irrelevance. I mean, we're sort of exiting an era where the three main legacy broadcast networks could control and dictate the narrative to the American people. And one of the things that President Trump did when he ran for office, he ran directly at that legacy media establishment. And he smashed the facade that they get to control what we say, what we think, the narrative around events. And we're seeing a lot of consequences that are flowing from President Trump doing that. I mean, look, NPR has been defunded. PBS has been defunded. Colbert is retiring. Joy Reid is out at MSNBC. Terry Moran has gone from ABC and now admitting that they are biased. CBS has now made some commitments to us that they're going to return to more fact-based journalism. And so I think you see some lashing out from people like Kimmel, who are frankly talentless and are looking for ways to get attention. But their grip on the narrative is slipping. That doesn't mean that it's still not important to hold them to the public interest standard. That's what we're going to have to do.
So we did elucidate and enumerate a number of statutes that could be used against ABC. If you would, Mr. Chairman, would you just explain for us what broadcasting in the public interest means? I don't think most people understand actually the depth of how important it is that ABC, NBC, CBS have these gratuitous broadcast privileges granted to them by the American taxpayer.
Yeah, the right way to sort of explain this to people so they understand it is in the media landscape as relevant here, there's two main buckets of actors. One, you've got what we call national programmers. So that's what Comcast is, Comcast NBC. That's what Disney is, Disney ABC. They're the ones that effectively create and produce these shows. They then provide those shows to individually licensed TV stations. And those TV stations are in the main owned by independent companies, independent from Comcast and Disney.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack here, but he had a lot to say. Obviously, he's thought about this for a while. He said he talks about these broadcast networks are supposed to act in the public interest. The public interest, I imagine, means to put out real news and be informative to the public, like Walter Cronkite. There's no reason why they can't be like Walter Cronkite, Dan Rather. We've accepted the fact that there's no more Walter Cronkite, Dan Rather, John Brinkley. So he's implying they should act in the public interest, and what Jimmy Kimmel was doing, putting on a false narrative, wasn't in the public interest. He's implying that there may be more scrutiny going forward if they don't act in the public interest. He wants an apology from Jimmy Kimmel, which is appropriate, to the Kirk family, which is appropriate. He talks about potential FCC suspension, either the show or either further action beyond the show. And Disney stepped in and preempted the FCC, so they self-imposed their own sanctions on themselves. He talks about Jimmy Kimmel's conduct makes it appear to be desperate, that it's hard for the legacy media to control the narrative and tell us what to think anymore. As you have more cable shows, you have Trump and the GE. This is where people come for the real news. That means that more people watch Trump and the GE for real news, and that's people watching Jimmy Kimmel. We put out the heat, and we put out the facts, and which means it's putting pressure on legacy media to control the narrative, and they may be getting desperate by potentially sensationalizing things, constantly talking about Trump, any reason to mention Trump, and doing things that may be over the top and, in this case, tasteless to control the narrative, which is not in the public interest. So it was almost a circular reference. They look desperate to be relevant. They're not relevant. It's hard to be relevant when you have Trump in the global economy that people listen to, and that other people steal our content to be relevant. He says the legacy media can no longer control the narrative, and Trump smashed. He broke the media. He bypassed the media by going through social media. When he took him off Twitter, he started Truth Social. So he bypassed the media. He works with grassroots groups like Charlie Kirk's group, and he also promoted his campaign through streamers, bloggers, YouTubers like Joe Rogan, and bypassed the corporate media, which put even more pressure on Jimmy Kimmel. I'm sure they are still chafing from that. The media has a problem with Trump because he broke the facade. He broke the media. He broke their stranglehold on news. They can no longer control the narrative, and they hate Trump for it. Those are the facts. He also talked about CBS is getting back to fact-based journalism, implying that they weren't putting out the facts before. That's scary. That they've been putting out journalism that hasn't been fact-based. CBS and other legacy media outlets, and I'm sure the FCC is looking at it. So the person who really canceled Jimmy Kimmel was Brendan Carr, chairman of the FCC, and I think this is a shot across the bow. And anybody else who wants to get canceled, continue along the path you're doing, putting out news that's not fact-based, and putting out material or behaving in a way that's not in the public interest. And you can find out just like Jimmy Kimmel just did. That's Trump and the GE. Thank you.